What's up everybody, this is Master Ian Gamer, and we are back with BlizzCon 2018 announcements. We're going to be talking a bit more about Ashe here in this video. The Overwatch What's Next panel just concluded, and we learned a bit of interesting information about Ashe as the character, some more information about Bob, thankfully, since he's probably my favorite part of Ashe's character, and we got some information about her development, and even a sneak peek at some of her brand new Legendary skins, which are going to be in-game. So I'm going to be talking about all of that here in this video, as well as expressing some of my concerns about Ashe as a character, as well as Overwatch as a whole, based on what we learned so far today. I'll be getting more into that towards the end, but to start, let's take a look at Ashe, and examine her interesting development backstory. Now, when it comes to developing characters for a game like Overwatch, you would imagine that most of them come out of some sort of necessity to make the game more balanced, someone like Brigitte, who is designed to counter the dive comp, or maybe a character who has a bit more of a story influence, like that of Doomfist and his involvement with Talon. However, Ashe came from a rather different area, which was that she was originally from the animated short, which we saw premiere today, and from there became a hero. So the developers in the What Next panel were talking about the origins of the McCree cinematic. They wanted to make a sort of Western-style animated short for McCree, which would chronicle the events that take place on Route 66, the train crash, the payload, etc. And in designing this animated short, they knew they had to come up with side characters to flesh out the Deadlock Gang, and one of the characters they came up with was Ashe. And it turns out that they just liked the very concept of her, even back from just in the storyboarding phase, so much that they decided to go through with making her a hero. And of course, thankfully, Bob managed to hitch along with her. They also talked about how Ashe's actual character design went through a number of different iterations. There was a point where it looked a little too much like Reaper that they had to change it up a bit, and ultimately they ended up on the very Western, pseudo-formal look that she has right now. And of course, they also talked about Bob and how he went through very few iterations because his initial concept, they evidently liked it so much that they pretty much stuck with it through the entire design phase, which is amazing. Now, we don't know exactly when they first started storyboarding this animated short. However, based off of what the devs have talked about with previous animated shorts, it sounds like the whole process from start to finish is generally a little over a year. It's possible that this was much longer for the Reunion animated short, but I do find it interesting to consider that Ashe, in terms of the internal sort of storyline of things that are happening with the Blizzard devs, seems to be a fairly recent addition. What I mean by this is the developers, of course, know a lot more about the game and the story and the direction they want to take it than they actually tell us. Certain characters, such as Wrecking Ball, for example, are in the works for a very long time before they actually end up making it into the game and become publicly known. Wrecking Ball was actually in the works for 4 years before his official addition. So assuming this animated short started being worked on at most a year and a half ago, Ashe has been a fairly recent development, and it's kind of interesting to consider that she made it into the game at this point instead of some other characters which you would imagine Blizzard has been working on for longer. I don't mean for this to sound like I'm bashing on her as a character, since I do think she looks very fun and I cannot wait to get to play her, but I do find it very interesting because it emphasizes how dynamic the sort of background of Overwatch really is. I'm sure there are quite a few characters who are still being worked on and have been planned for years at this point. Sam, Sanjay. I'm guessing there's quite a few of them if you ask me. So seeing a character who seems like a relatively recent addition, not just to the game itself, but in terms of the story and what Blizzard has planned out, it just seems sort of odd that they would go with her first, instead of sort of holding on to her for a bit longer and maybe working on her a bit more and pushing out some other characters which might be more relevant to the story at hand, or maybe be a bit more necessary for game balance, which is getting into one of the issues I sort of have with this reveal, but again, I'll touch on more of that a bit later on. But for now, let's take a look at her legendary skins. The first of these being Mobster. I gotta say, I really like this one, especially Bob once again. Bob is just my favorite part of this whole character, and I'm sure it is for a lot of other people too. The outfit looks amazing. I'm a huge fan of these sort of classic mobster sort of aesthetic, and it's absolutely on display here in this skin. We only see the one color palette version of this, so I'm a bit curious to see what the other one is gonna look like. I'm guessing it'll probably be more black oriented since this version is white oriented, but nonetheless, a fantastic looking skin, but I don't think it's quite as good as Safari. Here we go. We get an amazing Safari outfit for her. Once again, I love Bob's sort of like the big guy who's probably going to be carrying the backpack the whole ways while Ashe herself is doing the navigating. This is probably the skin that I'm going to be using for her if I play her very much, which I probably won't in all honesty, just because, well, she's a DPS and I predominantly play tank. But anyways, I'm super excited for all these skins and the character as a whole. Again, we don't know what the other color palette is going to be for the Safari skin, but just looking at Winston's Safari skin, which has a very, very similar aesthetic, you can expect maybe something along those lines with maybe a bit more blue in the other one. But nonetheless, these skins do look great. We did also get the premiere of her origin story video, which talks about how she was raised in a rich family, but then ultimately defaulted to a life of crime before forming the Deadlock Gang along with McCree. If you haven't seen that already, you can find it on the Play Overwatch YouTube channel, and I'll have a link to it down in the description. Anyways, there wasn't too much else to talk about. There were some interesting discussions regarding her design, talking about the different iterations she went through and about how Bob had very few iterations. I thought that was just really funny. But now I want to move over to some of the concerns I have for Ashe as a character. Now, the fact that we got another DPS isn't that big of an issue for me. I figured there was going to be a good chance they would be a damage hero since the last one we got was Doomfist over a year ago. Also, the fact that Ashe is a much more conventional FPS sort of character in that she has a rifle instead of like a gauntlet or hacking abilities like Sombra does. Another thing they did talk about in the What's Next panel was that Ashe is a very weapon-focused character as opposed to an ability-focused one. Obviously, Doomfist would be an ability-focused character, and Ashe is someone who relies more on being able to aim with her gun and dealing damage that way, instead of using abilities for whatever other sort of utility that might provide. But one of the big concerns I have is actually Ashe's abilities, which are the dynamite and her coach gun. These are going to be very problematic for tanks. Now, maybe I'm a bit biased in saying this because I am a tank main after all, but I feel like Ashe is just going to spell even more trouble for what's already one of the least favorable, if not the least favorable role in the game currently, which is playing tanks, especially main tanks. Her dynamite does a load of damage and is specifically designed to be able to sort of get over barriers, essentially. You could toss it over a barrier. Oh, it's behind the Reinhardt. The enemy team's positioning is all screwed up because they're going to take a lot of damage if they don't deal with that dynamite. Additionally, her coach gun has a massive amount of knockback on it for both herself, granted, but also the enemy, and I can just see the clips already of her running up right under a Reinhardt shield and coach gunning him off a cliff. I guarantee you that's going to be a thing, and it is going to suck. On top of all that, Bob, as much as I love him, has a very sort of wrecking ball pile driver effect when he first is activated. He runs forward and knocks enemies into the air, thus somewhat immobilizing them in the sense that they can't really move and they're just kind of in the air and are prime targets for their other team to start shooting at them. Once again, Bob is just going to end up wrecking Reinhardt, tossing him into the air, getting him out of the way of protecting his team, and overall, it's going to spell quite a bit of trouble. Now, once again, I don't want to get too pessimistic about this. I want to iterate again that I am very excited to get to play this new character and see just what exactly she ends up doing to the game as a whole, but I am concerned that she's not quite the new main tank or main tank assistant that a lot of people were kind of hoping she would be, and on top of that, it seems like she could actually be problematic to tanks in addition to not solving the issues that already exist. I don't know. Again, maybe this is just me being a tank player who's getting a bit skeptical about what this is going to end up spelling, and hopefully Hero 30 will be something that kind of better counters crowd control, or at the very least will just be a new main tank so we get a bit more variety there. So regardless of the situation, I am looking forward to Ashe being in the game. Another thing I wanted to point out though is there was a lot of anticipation for some sort of Overwatch expansion, some brand new game modes, some big developments with the story, something along those lines. And while BlizzCon isn't over just yet, it does sound like we might not be getting any of that, especially since they've put off talking about any sort of new map at BlizzCon this year. People are thinking that, oh, the reason they're not going to talk about a new map is they have some other big addition to talk about in addition to the new hero in the animated short. Well, so far it doesn't look like that's been the case. There was the new animated short, of course, which was fantastic once again, and it of course introduced Ashe, which has been the primary focus since then in all the panels we've had so far. And so at this point I am just a little bit concerned about whether or not that's going to be it for BlizzCon this year. No new story additions, no new big expansions, which, to be fair, I was kind of skeptical we'd be getting that in the first place, so I'm glad I didn't at least get my expectations up for something that it looks like now probably isn't going to end up happening. I don't know, we do still have that third elusive new social feature, which is supposed to be coming out sometime in 2019. Maybe we'll hear a little bit more about that at BlizzCon, but I'm guessing they're probably just going to hold off on it until, well, 2019, when it actually comes out. And to be fair, we did get a bit of story progression in the animated short. We of course were introduced to Echo, who 100% is going to be a future hero at some point. And it sounds like this is McCree's way of sort of responding to Winston's recall. Again, it's nice to see what some of the other characters are actually doing in response to the recall. Even if the story itself hasn't really moved forward, we're getting a bit of a look at what's happening. We of course had Reinhardt's response, we had May's response, and now we're starting to get McCree's response as well. I'm definitely going to be talking about Echo though in a future video because she is very, very interesting for a lot more reasons than you may initially think. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about her quite a bit and probably the animated short as a whole because there's a lot of interesting things to talk about there in general. But that'll do it for this video. Hopefully this didn't get too rambly or run on too long. I just wanted to share my sort of thoughts and first impressions following the What's Next panel and the new information we got about Ashe and Bob and the story as a whole. So thank you so much for watching this longer video. Be sure to leave your thoughts about anything I talked about here today or Ashe in general just down in the comments below. And if you like this video, then be sure to leave a like and share it with a friend if you really liked it. Subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and turn on notifications to keep up with all my future Overwatch content. This is Master Ian Gamer signing off, and until next time, I hope you're looking forward to playing Ashe just as much as I am, so have a great day.